Welcome to Lit Happens, Unpacking Senior English. I'm Adriel.
And I'm Belle.
We're experienced English teachers dedicated to supporting both new and experienced educators in a world in which we are often time poor, to empower our students to excel in their English studies.
If you're an English teacher, like us, navigating this curriculum, then this podcast is designed with you in mind. And our mission really is to break down the complexities by unpacking English nationally.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 39 of Lit Happens. Today's podcast episode is all on the HSC exams, final preparations. We have Adriel with us as always. Hi Adriel, how are you?
Hey Belle, doing well. Ready for this little break here and looking for a timely reminder of how we best prep our kids. We're sort of right in the moment, so what better week to talk about this in terms of getting our kids ready for the upcoming HSC exams.
Yeah, perfect. I think before we get into our episode, then we might just do our lit and quit for today. So our lit or quit is prioritizing exam practice over content revision in the final weeks. Lit or quit? Good question.
I think that's lit for sure. There's no reason in English in particular for kids to really be going over content at this time of the year. They should already know it by now. So I definitely think they need to be prioritizing how they can get all their ideas down within those exam framework and the time. So we'll definitely talk about this in today's episode, but I definitely think it is lit to prioritize exam practice over content revision in the final weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more, especially the way that now Module C is kind of integrated. There isn't a need to have related text in all the modules. So you really do have lots of time across those terms to get your content out of the way. Now, does that mean that your students remember it? That's maybe a different story. But I think as the teacher, you've done a great job at covering all the content. And now it's that final reminder and prep off the back of trial exams for those exam skills. So yeah, I agree with you completely there, Adriel. I think it's important to prioritize. Well, that's perfect because we don't want to talk too much on this lit and quit because it is going to be, I think, the basis of our episode today anyway. So we just wanted to do an episode, didn't we, on the final preparation ideas about exams. And maybe it's good to have this little reflection as well because we always are thinking about how we're going to improve the next HSC group that comes through, how we're going to improve the flow of that. So it's good to make all these considerations. In saying that then, Adriel, question one, listeners want to know, why is final preparation for HSC English examinations so important?
Yeah, cool. I think this is like that final 10% of the journey now in terms of our role as a teacher. We need to push the kids. I always said to the kids after their trial examination, you have like this moment where you feel like just quitting or having that break, but really it should be that time where we start to really hone in on the exam skills. So this is, I guess, a bit of a lead on from what we just mentioned with our little quit question. By now, your students should know all of their content, and now it's about putting it all together. So I think the final preparation for HSC exams is very important because this could be the difference between your band 5 or your band 6, your band 3 or your band 4. And we obviously want to have our kids engaged with not only the content, but being able to perform the best that they can. So when we sort of discuss this sort of stuff, again, we have had a few episodes on what the exams look like, both paper 1 and paper 2. We understand that in each of those episodes that we have spoken, that exam conditions, time conditions are a lot more straining and stressful than the 2-week or 3-week period during the school term or school assessment term, where kids can actually develop responses over a long time. Now, when we start to look at these sort of final ideas and final practice preparation, there are a few things that I would like to mention in regards to this. So what we want our kids to start to understand in the English sort of curriculum is I can't emphasize this enough. Manage your time well. So
Yeah.
now is a time where kids have already developed their final drafts, and now they're trying to adapt that question or that draft, sorry, to multiple questions that they've come across. Now is the time also as a teacher where you might start to suggest things for your student in a little bit more detail and a little bit more depth. If, like I said, it is one of those final drafts. So we're helping them refine their responses to take in with them to the examination. Now, again, this is a bit of that controversial topic there. Like, should kids have pre-prepared responses, etc., etc.? Again, pre-prepared responses, I'm not saying they're going in and writing word for word. I'm talking about their preparation. These are the foundational tools that they now have in order for them to go in and use something. You'd rather have all
Yeah.
the toolkit there with you in the examination as opposed to going in with nothing at all. So, we definitely want to be encouraging that for our students. And like I said, for those students that have been working hard, now is your time as a teacher. You can give them a few more tips, a few more ideas as to expression, the way you adapt things. This is what I would be starting to finalize a bit. But this is with the silver lining there in terms of if this is their final draft. If this is their first or second draft, or you continue to work with what you've got. And
Yeah.
for the lower end students in your class or the kids that are only just starting to put in the work now, you don't need to pull your hair out. I don't think personally over every little, statement, sentence, whatever, because they've had the whole year to work on this. So now it's your goal to, get them to where they realistically can. I think that's
Yeah.
probably the other big thing as a teacher. So really, really understand that. Set yourself clear goals for each of your respective students. You'll probably have a class from anywhere between 15 to 25 students, or 24, I think, in the senior classes, which is what it's supposed to be. But yeah, really, really set yourself clear goals. Well, how are you going to work with each of these students? And also, I think getting them right mentally. And we'll speak a little bit about this as we do go on through the episode. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
roughly sort of why it's important.
No, I think that's right. And I think it's really powerful coming off the back of trial exams to just maybe point out to students how they bridge the gap between how they prepared and performed at trial versus what they're going to do differently for the HSC, because that's the whole point of trial exam for our students, right? It's meant to be
Yeah.
the practice of the exam so that when they are doing it properly, it's good, they're ready to go, there's kind of no real surprises there, their eyes are open. And so I really think, I loved your point about we really need to be realistic about where students are at and how long they've been working and progressing throughout the year, and kind of
Yeah.
maybe just support students to be as prepared as they can be. But also, I think it's really powerful to have the acknowledgements as teachers at this point. We can't perform miracles 2-3 weeks
Mm,
out from the exam. And not only that, but the exams are really a testament of how the students have been preparing and performing across the year. So I think it's really, really good to keep that in mind. Okay,
yeah.
let's get on to our next question then. How do you help students manage their time effectively within a HSC exam, especially for
Mm,
English?
yeah. So in your last few weeks of the term, now this episode will probably drop in our second week of school holidays, so we would have already gone through a lot of this stuff. But
Mhm.
effective time management requires students to just practice. I think this is probably the most
Yeah.
important thing. Set yourself a 40-minute timer, use your watch or Google Timer, whatever it may be, and see what you can do. That's definitely going to be the challenge. And we say 40 to 45 minutes per section. It's about 2 minutes per mark, and it roughly equates to 40 minutes per section. So if the kids are not working through different sections within these timeframes, that would probably be the thing that you point out with your students. And it's something that I've definitely pointed out. It's something that we reflected on after the trial examination, where they'd write fantastic, let's say, for example, in paper 2, fantastic responses in mod A or B. And then come mod C, it's like half a page of writing, and you just realize that they ran out of time. So in
Yeah.
saying that, they've given themselves very limited opportunity to score any marks for a 20 marker, where they might have got 15 or 16 out of 20. if they were to get 12 out of 20 for all 3 or 4 responses, they're getting a lot more, or 3 modules, I should say, they're getting a lot more marks. So time management is very, very important for our students. I know we definitely have come across different approaches to the way kids approach examinations. This is where you as a teacher need to know your students and definitely encourage them. I generally sort of say for paper 1, for example, me personally, I would get in with the essay, get all your ideas done, smash them out, because then you don't have to worry about remembering your quotes. The way you have sort of prepped, you get it all done, and then you can go on to do your unseen texts and questions. I know other teachers do it the other way. I guess that also depends on your students as well. Again, like for me, if I just mentioned there, if I have a student that's prepped and they're ready to go, I'll encourage them to do that second section first in paper 1, only because they can definitely, like, they know that is that refined response, and that is a surefire way of getting your A range responses, 18 to 20 marks. They know they can get that. Whereas with the unseen questions, yes, we can, use the formulas that are given, and yes, it is not difficult getting those 20 marks, but it's still an element of the unknown there. So for me, like I said, if I have a student that's prepped, go in, smash that essay out, and then again, because they've prepped their essay, they might get that done in 35 minutes, which gives them spare time then to go into that unseen question and knock things out. So it's all about practicing. It's about seeing what works, and hopefully we have experimented with that over the last few weeks, and this is something that we are continuing to encourage our kids up until HSC day, come either week 1 or 2 in their respective HSC years, so of term 4. Definitely those are probably the biggest ways I would help my students manage their time effectively, is getting that Google timer out there and practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for any students that might be listening in the school holidays now, a couple of weeks out from their exams, at this point, you want to have something polished or semi-polished, a base essay like you talked about, Adrian. I'll talk about essays shortly, but base analysis, base responses, and just practice. Within time conditions, and you can be a bit clever about how you do this as well. So you can start off open book, then you can do kind of a partial open book, and then you really do have to at least a week before minimum test yourself, close book, see what you can recall, see what you can remember. And I would say for students too, keep a list or a record of like what you're doing within that exam, how you're feeling, like what or in reflection, what did you forget to do, or what did you find is tripping you up? And then when you approach the next paper, you're approaching it with that mindset of, well, what particularly for me as the individual am I working on? Because I think what you said is a good strategy in terms of maybe starting the essay first. My general advice is to do it the other way around, but I can see why your way could have very much deep value for a student who maybe is a little bit overwhelmed with short answer or does get a little bit thrown off their game. And if they can go in prepared, do that essay first, then they can give themselves more time until the exam finishes to work on that short answer. So I think the important takeaway is, as a student, you should be reflecting on what are your strengths in this paper, and then what are the weaknesses and what are you working on, and then keeping that in the forefront of your mind when you're doing more practice papers. I think that's some awesome tips for students. I know now we're going to get into the next question, Adriel. We're going to give us all some fabulous pointers as to how to prepare students to write their strong critical essays that they're going to need in the common essay and in module A and B as well.
Yeah, so they will be writing a minimum of 3 essays. So obviously for the English exam, it's important for us to understand, for students, that this is pretty much the crux of your HSC. How well can you write your critical responses here? So you'll probably have them you will have them in paper 1, section 2, and then for both module A and B, you will have critical writing examples there. And this is where you need to make sure you have addressed your responses clearly. So some of the things that we really want to emphasize with our students at this point, like I said, most of your top end students now, and if you are a top end student, you are refining your responses now, and you're looking to adapt it to multiple questions.
Yep.
So this is where you could probably use AI, maybe run through all the past HSC questions for your respective modules, and maybe get it to write, spit out what types of questions, similar to the ones that have been written before. What are some types of questions we can use? And really go ahead and try to adapt your response that way. You will see in this, you will see in this as well. Like, I know I've done this with my class recently, where we wrote down all previous 5 years responses. Sorry, six years in terms of the HSC, the questions that have come across, and 5 or 6 years, who knows? I'm losing my train of thought there, but the kids were asking me, like, how do we adapt our questions regarding it? So, we wrote down all the questions together. We looked at the keywords, we looked at the key values, key ideas, and if your response is one that caters to most of those key ideas, if you have developed it off the rubric statements, your response should be able to be adapted or malleable enough to be molded around whatever the question may be that year. So we actually looked at it. We did it. When kids visualize it, they can see it. So if you are doing like a holiday workshop, this could be something that you might do with your students. It's nice and easy, nice and quick. And again, it does help your top end students with those higher leverage sort of strategies that we might continue with. But again, the simple things is this, make sure your responses have a clear thesis, make sure your ideas are backed up by evidence and techniques, and make sure that your language is now being refined. All right. This is the time where we start to move away from the simple language and we start to embellish our responses in order to make them stand out for our HSC markers. Again, I use this sort of anecdote for our students where we might consider a HSC marker has just gone to work all day, and then they come home and then they sit behind their marking sort of framework. And if they were to read responses that are just monotonous, lack that personal voice, lack that nuance, don't stand out, it's about creating that impression in the mind of your marker. How is this response well? And this is where I'm sort of mentioning, make sure now is the time where you start to embellish your responses. So teachers listening, we might get and help our students with this regard, or in this regard when it comes to our responses now. And, then it's up to that student to then adapt and mold it to those questions that they are receiving. So yeah, those are a few things that I would highly recommend for our students and teachers in order to write those stronger critical essays. It's about making sure you have solid thesis statements, solid, topic sentences and points backed up by credible evidence and techniques, but then also we're looking at embellishing our language now. So yeah, these are the final tips that I would say for our stronger candidates and, developing those stronger critical essays.
Yeah, I think that's some fabulous suggestions there. What stands out to me too is how you mentioned that a lot of your high performing students right now would probably already have their things finalized and are now working to adapt their base, analysis or base response and ideas to fit specifics of a variety of questions they could be asked in that module. And I think that's a really important tip for students to think about. What your high performing students are doing is they're looking at those questions, and yes, on one hand, they're doing and how does what I have already connect and already correlate, but they're also looking at that question in detail. Not only what are the key terms in the questions, but what are some synonyms that branch off from those key terms, or other associated terms or ideas or words or issues that could be relevant within the scope of that question. Because what that actually then does, it enables students to turn their base analysis and then angle it to a more specific, nuanced interpretation based on the specifics of a question. So just some food for thought as well for students that are likely listening here as well. Okay, you want that nuanced approach as much as possible. All right, we might move into then our next question, Adriel. So what are your tips and tricks for getting students ready for the paper one short answer questions? Because I know there's a lot of good strategy involved here that a lot of students can be implementing from today as we speak, practicing those short answers up until the exam comes. So what are your suggestions here?
Yeah. So if you haven't already done so, listen to our episode on how to approach the short answer sections. That's probably a good starting point. for us, and we actually go over in detail, but I'm just going to quickly cover some of the key points. Now, some of the key things that I've realized that students fail to realize is you need to make sure when addressing a question that your point stands out. It is not a mere rewording of the question, but you have some sort of angle into what the question is asking. And, people will definitely talk about this as, focus. Some people mention it as an attacking of the question. Make sure you have a good sentence attack and establishing your idea. And I thought this was probably a good time to mention things like, don't neglect the title of the pieces that you receive.
Yes.
I often ask the students this question here. It's like, okay, why does an author go through, or a painter or a photographer go through the trouble of actually entitling their piece? Or what does the title reveal? It's a snapshot into what the piece is going to be about. And generally, it will give you a bit of an idea as to how to approach your sentence attack, or your attack and approach to the question. So do not neglect that. I think that's the number one key piece of advice that I would say for those short answer questions when looking at those unseen texts. Second of all, make sure you read the question before you go and read through each of the respective texts. Some of you may know and may have seen in practice examples. This is students that I'm speaking to right now, where you'll get like a nonfiction extract that might be 3 to 4 pages long, but it's only a 3-mark question, which means everything you need might just be in the opening paragraph and then the final parts of the text. So this is where you save that time and you really, really, look at your approach. Other things are this. So once you've attacked your question, you've given yourself a point of difference in the way that you're sort of approaching what the question is and what you are actually focusing in on. Like, you have to make that clear. Or depending on the mark structure, I would say this. If it's a 3-mark question, you need at least 2 techniques and 2 pieces of textual evidence. If it's a 4-mark question, at least 3 techniques, 3 pieces of textual evidence. Now, does that mean, can we double up on textual evidence for one of the techniques? So let's say, for example, we see an extended metaphor run through our entire piece and it's used in multiple occasions. That's correct. You may just use that metaphor, but have 2 different examples of it. You'll also notice this for short answers. Generally, that last question might be like a comparative type question, generally speaking. And there is no reason why the stuff that you have used in prior questions when approaching, let's say, a question 1 may have been for text 1, analyzing an idea about the human experience, happiness in the human experience, let's say. And then text 3 talks about, the alternate side of happiness. And you looked at that in responding to that question. You've already done the framework in terms of your analysis. There is no reason for you to recreate the wheel, for those comparative questions. Go back through, look at your analysis, and use that as a base, and then obviously embellish depending on how many more pieces of evidence and and techniques that you need to be using in order to get those 5 to 6 marks for that final question. So those are key. Remember, allocate about 2 minutes per mark. When looking at the unseen text, don't get fixated on having to know every single thing about that text. You can't. You don't have enough time. You don't even have enough reading time. So again, look at skim readings. What are the key words? And this is where it's important to attack your question properly. So have a unique attack. Once you understand what you're talking about, then quickly skim through your text and look for examples of your attack. That is what's going to help you guys, especially for those longer responses. Poems are easier. Your visual. I should also say this. Please don't get confused with the different forms. Okay, you need form-specific techniques. So if it's a visual text, you're using visual techniques. If it's a poem, you're using poetic language and techniques. If it's a non-fiction extract or a feature article, you're using the respective techniques as well. So, I'm sorry, a fiction or a feature article or non-fiction extract, you are using the respective techniques for those respective forms. There are many lists available online. Nessa actually provides a glossary as well. Use them. Make sure you know at least 5 or 6 base techniques for each of those forms that you can use. And like I said, that will be your marks for that short answer question. It's not hard to get marks in this section, but I think the biggest issue is students will not attack the question well, which means their focus isn't clear, and then the rest of the response becomes just a big word salad or jumble. So
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I agree. Because I know I know I have some students who feel like even when they're doing an essay, for example, it's once they get into it that they start to really work out what's their answer.
Yeah.
And I say to my guys sometimes, if you're feeling that thrown, why can't you leave the line or two blank for that attack sentence or that first sentence
Yeah.
and get into your evidence first and then work out what you're saying and then kind of come back and piece it together? Because you do have to be clear. Like you said, you can't just restate the question. You need to actually interpret it. And when you interpret it, then you're able to say something. If you're not saying anything, there's likely that issue of interpretation, which will keep you in that more middle of the marking range for your short answer, as opposed to getting close to the full markers. Now, I think that's some great strategies. I loved your idea of your short list of techniques. If you have this as like a visual list in your mind, then when reading time begins and you start looking at your text, you can already say to yourself, I'm going to try and identify the top 3 of those techniques, you know? So in my poem, maybe I'm thinking a metaphor, symbol, you know, and then I'm looking for that straight away. And it releases some pressure too, because you're not looking for like a needle in a haystack per se. You've got that bit of direction. And I think that's a fabulous tip. If I can say one more thing too, I know that in the HSC, in the writing booklet for section 1, they've got the lines that give you that indication of roughly how much you should be writing, right? Now, obviously, every student has a different size of writing. Some have really little writing, some have medium, some have really large writing. I would say if you have like an average size, you need to be filling those lines. I would say if your writing's a bit smaller, you're trying to get as close to that line as possible. But if your writing is really big and enormous, you might actually need to consider, is me just filling out the line or finishing 1 or 2 before going to be enough? Because you need to consider the depth of that answer, obviously within mark range and, you know, timing, like all the great tips that you've given. But I think sometimes students forget how much of a difference that makes and how, if you've got large writing, how deceiving it can be. You might think, but I filled it, but need to think about, did you actually write enough detail in there though to compensate? So I feel like that's just a little thing students miss in the handwritten component. All right, these are fabulous. Okay, last words of wisdom for the last kind of question for this episode, Adriel. Well, this is a good one. Okay, so how would you then actually go about trying to boost student confidence for the exam? Because we know they're nervous, we know they're stressed, we know that English is a bit, I would say in a way tricky because it's the first one. Like I know it's ripping the Band-Aid off, but it's a very intense start to every student's HSC. So what are some tips you might have for boosting confidence here?
Yeah. I think framing this right from the get-go, I mean, depends on what your message was right from the beginning of this journey that you've had with your respective cohort. I know, for example, for me, the way I sort of established this right at the beginning is I'm not a big proponent of letting that mark dictate your worth in terms of your examination. It's more about that learning curve. And when students sort of understand, okay, cool, I was at X, Y, and Z back at the beginning of year 11, and now I understand this, and this for my 12 course, that in itself can instill some confidence for your student, because then you can sort of build on that. Be like, hey, look at you now, you know, look at you go now. Look at how well you're writing this, or look at the improvements you've made in this respective area. And when you can identify that as a teacher for these students, it definitely does help to boost that confidence for the examinations. The different approaches that they might be taking as well, it's about fostering it now. I will also say this, it's important for students to maybe, you know, obviously make those sacrifices in these final 2 weeks. If you're a student, it may mean you're studying crazy amount of time now, you know, and the one thing I would prioritize is not overdoing it so you get sick. Make sure you sleep, but you maybe cut down on some of your social commitments, some of your work commitments during this time, just as you're prepping for the final part, just so you don't have that extra stress of having to do something for work or having to go here or there, you know, and then thinking to yourself, oh man, I shouldn't have wasted that time. I could have used it to study. So, you know, make some sacrifices during the time, but one of the sacrifices I would say is do not sacrifice your sleep time. You're on holidays now, so obviously during the day, go outside, go get some fresh air in your breaks, you know, have little breaks here or there. And just understand at the end of the day, I mean, I know I've had students over the years now, last few years, where unis come out and give them the early entries. prior to the HSC examination. So that's like an added pressure that is now relieved. But you still want to go in it and do the best you can. I know this sounds a bit contradictory now, contrary to what I mentioned about 2-3 minutes ago. You got the best mark possible now, because it is a reflection of all the hard work you've put in, not only over this year, but the year before, and all of your years
Yes.
7 to 12. This is that
Mhm.
definition of just, how far you've come. Again,
Mhm.
it doesn't all matter in terms of the ATAR, again, because you'll get into whichever uni you want, but let it be a good sort of litmus test to see where you're at. It's not the final definition of who you are as a human being, but it's just showing you where you are at amongst the state, amongst your cohort, where you need to improve, because life is a lifelong journey. It's not the end, HSC, it's just the end of one chapter. It's the beginning of a new chapter. So using these sorts of terms for your students, you can hopefully instill some confidence in them, because stress is going to be massive. You can't say that there is going to be an absence of stress. You are going to have amplified stress during this time. And it's how
Yeah.
we approach these stressful moments that will definitely help you. Like I said, prioritize sleep, make sure you're eating well and eating good foods. And really just taking care of your well-being. Go for a walk as well, maybe for your breaks,
Yes.
instead of doom scrolling on your social media sites and seeing what things are. Disconnect from the world in terms of the social world, but connect to your actual world around you and the world of your studies. And you'll see that this might even elevate you, tip you over from that band 4 to the 5, or that band 5 to the 6. So that's what I would be encouraging our teachers to do for our students, really encouraging that well-being fact and element, because they have been hopefully putting in the hard work. If you get a student that hasn't put in the hard work and they have great expectations of what they can get, you might need to be real with them and say, hey, in order to get what you're perceiving as your capability, you would have had to start working earlier. Don't just leave it at that, though. You might say, well, what can be achievable for you now? What are we working towards? And
Yes.
really get them to question that.
Mhm.
Just so you don't put that undue stress on yourself as a teacher as well. I think, at the end of the day, I say this to the students, a lot of the results that you get is 90% you, and we guide you along the way. And it's up to you to listen to that guidance we give with that 10% or 20%, depending on, the type of teacher you are. But I think those are a few different things that we can speak about in terms of boosting the confidence for our students. And also yourself as a practitioner and a teacher, find what works for you, because I'm sure this might be your first HSC class that you're taking through, or it might be your 10th or 11th, I mean, every year, I know for me personally, there's always something new to learn. There's always I
Yes.
could have done this, or maybe, and I'm still learning more and more and more from a vast array of teachers with vast ranges of experience. So, yeah, it's a big learning curve for both your students and yourself as a teacher.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely some fabulous ideas there about boosting confidence. I think it's important to have that levity too amongst all the stress. So, you know, in your schools, you've probably been doing final week activities. I know we used to do like little classroom parties and things like that. I know,
Mm,
Angel, at our school, our teachers, we really like to get canvas boards and, put the names up and do all that and kind of celebrate the year and
yeah,
celebrate all the hard work and celebrate all that has been learned. And I think if you're ending with that high note, we're still reminding the students that they're almost at that finish line. But if you're ending with that high note, I think you're putting them in that positive mindset to make that last push. So we don't want them
yeah,
kind of feeling like, well, what's the point then? This is like pointless. I just got to sit the exam. I think there's a lot to be said on ending on that positivity and how it can really
mm,
aid the students to get themselves across that finish line. And students, if you're listening, reach out to those around you. Let your family in on, guys, this is my study schedule. I'm putting it on my door. Be aware, be mindful of noise, or even, saying to mom or dad or sibling or whoever else is in their house, hey, listen, I get really, stuck in my studying. Do you think you could come and bring me a snack every hour or so? Or just sometimes
yeah,
I found it's just nice to have a quick 5-minute conversation to like
mm,
ease out and then get back into it. So I think just you're not studying alone, let your family in, reach out to your friends, form some study groups. If you really struggle with that one-on-one, form a study
Yeah.
group, get rid of those damned phones, okay? Put the now's not the time, lock them away somewhere and make a study group. Go out to a park and, test each other, quiz each other, go to a library. There's so many fun ways to study if you're getting really sick of your space and you need that fresh air. And what a great spot as well to be able to, if you're in the playground or at a park, yes, you can, enjoy the sun, fresh air, and use that in between the studying, because you have to look after yourselves. You have to. I think what you said, Adriel, about, this is setting yourself up for, lifelong patterns and, the way that you're going to be striving. It really has to be something that's really manageable. So take those positives as well to help balance some of that stress. And then you'll feel light as a bird once those exams are done. Like, it'll, and that will be the beauty. That will be the payoff. You work that hard for that feeling at the end. So I'm really, I know it's a stressful time, but I'm really excited for the students. Because, I still remember what it was like when you were like, oh my God, exams are done. I can actually live an kind of adult life now. It's that really important transition. And it's so palpable and exciting. So I wish everyone listening the best of luck, and well done to all the HSC teachers, that have worked their butts off in guiding and supporting those students, because they cannot get through it without you. So well done to everyone.
Yeah, well done.
All right, we might then wrap up the episode for another week. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. Please continue to engage with us. Let us know what other episodes or points you might want us to make some episodes on, and definitely share us around, please, guys. The more exposure that we have, the more we're going to be able to produce some great content. That we've got Adriel and I now hitting our planning phase now that we're in the school holidays for the podcast. So keep an eye out. We're going to have a lot of things coming out. But as always, thank you so much.